On the night when everything we thought we knew about interstellar objects quietly died, the sky looked perfectly normal, a calm, indifferent darkness. If you stepped outside, you wouldn't feel the slightest hint that something had already gone wrong. But inside a sealed observation chamber beneath the Chilean Atacama Plateau, the man who saw it first whispered one sentence that still makes scientists lose sleep. It changed color again, and it's brighter. That's how the countdown truly began. Not with explosions, not with alarms, with a whisper from a man who had watched the stars his whole life and suddenly realized one of them was looking back. If you stay with me until the end of this story, you will never again assume that space is quiet or that something drifting through it is harmless. You will understand why governments locked entire departments behind biometric walls and why some astronomers stopped going home. And you will understand what it means when an object from another star begins to glow like something waking up. 3I Atlas wasn't supposed to be in our sky at all. We weren't prepared for another interstellar object so soon, especially not one that behaved like it had a pulse. But on July 9, 2025, it drifted into our detection sweeps like a slow-motion bullet. At first, it was nothing more than a cold, dark speck cutting across the background of distant stars. A perfect visitor, silent, predictable, harmless. But then came the first anomaly. Its albedo, the measure of how much sunlight it reflects, jumped in a way that defied explanation. Not gradually, not due to rotation, instantly. A flash of reflected gold where only flat gray should have been. Astronomers called it a data glitch. They always call it that at first. Then it happened again, and again. A pattern began, one that should not have existed. Every few days, 3I Atlas shifted to a new dominant color in the visible spectrum. Blue, then green, then gold, then a deep red that made its light curve spike like a heartbeat on a monitor. Dozens of theories flooded the community. Surface volatile sublimating in waves, rotationally exposed mineral patches, micrometeorite stripping, exotic ices, photochemical scattering, a dozen respectable excuses, but none of them explained why the color pulses were increasing in brightness and duration. None explained why the spectral readings suggested energy release, not just reflection. None explained the hum. That came later, during a radio sweep, when the broadband receivers picked up a faint oscillation buried beneath solar noise, a patterned fluctuation synchronized with each exact moment of each color shift. Scientists argued for weeks about whether it was an artifact, an interference spike, or something internal to the object, but nothing in the solar system emits signals timed to its own surface brightness variations, except maybe machines. The first emergency meeting happened in Geneva 3 months later. Representatives from 12 observatories, 5 national space agencies, and 1 organization so classified its name was redacted from the meeting summary. They weren't discussing discovery. They weren't discussing trajectories. They were discussing survivability. Because by then, the orbit solution was stable, refined, and absolutely horrifying. Probability of Earth impact, 99.2%. Margin of uncertainty, collapsing. It wasn't coming close. It wasn't grazing atmosphere. It wasn't threading through the lunar orbit. It was aimed, directly, unwaveringly, at our planet. Imagine being in that room. Imagine looking at a trajectory simulation where every projected line, every probabilistic smear, every orbital arc funnels into one single point on Earth's surface. A point that no matter how far back you run the model,
No matter how many perturbations you add, no matter how many times you scream at the algorithms to redo the physics, never moves. They tried everything: radiation pressure adjustments, Yarkovsky drift estimations, solar wind fluctuations, outgassing possibilities, mass uncertainty ranges. But 3I Atlas refused to budge. "This object is not governed by normal dynamics," one analyst finally said. His voice cracked when he said it. That sentence was later removed from the transcript. By October, the color shifts were happening daily, then every 12 hours, then every 8. And every time the color changed, the energy readings spiked higher than the last cycle. Something was building. Something was progressing. And every scientist who saw the light curve data had the same terrible thought: it's evolving. But the moment everything snapped, the moment speculation became fear, came on October 29th. That was the night 3I Atlas turned white. Not the diffuse, dusty white of comets, not the pale, reflective white of ice, a hard, electric white, like a welding torch held against the fabric of the night. For 3 minutes, the object outshone every star in its sector. For 3 minutes, the sensors of half the world's telescopes maxed out. For 3 minutes, the space agencies of 4 continents realized they were no longer looking at an inert celestial body. They were looking at something that was powering up. And no one could explain why an object on a collision course with Earth would need to do that. Governments panicked quietly. Nothing leaked. Nothing reached the public. Every astronomer who could calculate its mass distribution was forced to sign new confidentiality contracts. Some did it willingly. Some didn't want to. Some never came back to their observatories after that week. What terrified them wasn't the trajectory. It wasn't even the colors. It was the projections. Because by November, they understood the final cycle was beginning. Every shift was stronger than the last by a measurable factor, an exponential trend. It was accelerating in color evolution, accelerating in brightness, accelerating in energy output. And each phase was shorter than the previous, like stages, like steps, like phases before transformation. On November 7th, the object shifted into a deep ultraviolet glow. It shouldn't have been visible to the naked eye, and yet cameras recorded a faint halo, a corona of impossible wavelengths bleeding into visible space. The reports stopped using the word object. They quietly began using another word: entity. On November 10th, it shed a plume, something no interstellar visitor has ever done. The plume wasn't gas, dust, or ionized material. It was too directional, too stable, too purposeful. A beam, faint but structured, pointed not away from the sun like cometary tails, but towards us. That was the night 3 scientists independently asked the same question in 3 different countries. Does it know where it's going? By November 12th, the night this story truly begins, its color surged again. But this time, it wasn't a shift. It was a distortion, a ripple of violet and white flickering across its surface like stress ripples across metal. And that's when Dr. Imogen Cade, the lead spectral analyst at Cerro Armazón Observatory, realized the truth. It's not just changing color, it's entering its final phase. She didn't mean final phase before impact. She meant final phase before something, something for which Earth was the end point. That same night, something else happened, something the public still has not been told. The object's velocity changed, not due to gravity, not due to solar wind, not due to outgassing. It simply nudged itself. A 0.03% acceleration directly along its inbound trajectory. a correction, a refinement, a final, precise alignment with Earth's center of mass. A natural object doesn't do that. A comet doesn't do that. A rock doesn't do that. Only something with intent does that. The astronomers in the room that night didn't speak for almost a full minute. Some stood, some sat down, one left the room entirely and didn't return until morning. And when Dr. Cade finally looked at the updated projection, when she saw the new line, the perfect knife-straight line, she felt her vision blur. She later wrote in her private log, which was leaked only months later.
The moment they admitted it was aiming, something shifted inside every person in that observatory. Like gravity itself had leaned a little closer, pressing on their chests. Humans are good at ignoring danger when it's far away, theoretical, abstract. But once it becomes intentional, once it looks back, that's when the fear stops being scientific and becomes primal. Dr. Cade didn't sleep that night. She sat alone in the analysis chamber, surrounded by silent servers, blinking with the soft rhythm of a heartbeat that wasn't human. Every monitor showed the same impossibly straight trajectory line. Every model confirmed the same inevitability. Every countdown timer was synchronized to the same approaching moment. Impact in 67 days. She replayed the velocity shift over and over, staring at the subtle curve where the object corrected itself, like a pilot brushing the controls of a drifting craft. At 3:14 a.m., she finally whispered the question she had been trying to avoid for weeks. What if the color changes aren't chemical? She remembered an experiment from her university days, studying luminescent biological patterns in deep-sea organisms, creatures that communicated through pulses of color, so faint and so fast the human eye couldn't fully perceive them. Creatures that lived in total darkness, evolving signaling methods more sophisticated than anything on land. But 3I-8LAS didn't live in the ocean. It lived in the void. And whatever it was signaling now, the message was escalating. At 4:07 a.m., she noticed something in the data no one else had spotted. The intervals between color shifts weren't just shortening, they were following a ratio pattern. Not exponential, not random, harmonic. Like chords. Like steps in a sequence that built on itself, each phase moving closer to a resonance point. But what kind of celestial object follows harmonic phases? What kind of natural body pulses like a living signal generator? She didn't have an answer. But the next morning, when she presented the pattern to the Geneva Committee, a chilling silence fell over the room. One member, the oldest astrophysicist among them, leaned forward, hands shaking slightly. "That's not geology," he said. "That's not physics either." Someone asked what he meant. He hesitated before answering. "It's behavior." But the worst blow came when they finally calculated the kinetic yield of impact, now that the mass estimates were stable. The object was heavier than any interstellar visitor ever recorded, denser, more compact, not fluffy like 2I-Borisov, not hollow like some comets, a solid, unforgiving mass of hyper-dense material. At its current velocity, an impact would release the equivalent of 24 million megatons of TNT. For 3 seconds, no one breathed. It wouldn't just destroy a region. It wouldn't trigger localized fallout. It wouldn't be a catastrophe in the way humans usually misuse the word catastrophe. It would be terminal. And still, the world knew nothing. They couldn't tell them. Not yet. Governments argued that panic would tear society apart long before the impact did. that news of an incoming interstellar object with a 99% chance of direct collision would cause riots, collapses, mass migrations, suicides, total breakdowns of supply chains. They weren't wrong, but they weren't entirely honest either, because there was one more reason they stayed silent. They didn't know if 3I-8LES was impact-bound by accident or by intention. On November 14th, everything escalated. At exactly 22:16 UTC, observatories around the world recorded the most intense color shift yet. Not blue, not red, not ultraviolet. A deep, impossible black, darker than the background of space, surrounded by a razor-thin line of white fire, like a pupil inside an eye. For 7 seconds, 3I-8LES looked alive. And then the radio burst hit. A spike so powerful, it overloaded receivers from New Mexico to Kazakhstan. The burst wasn't random noise, it had structure, repetition, rhythm, like knocking. 3 clusters of frequencies repeating in perfect intervals. Astronomers stared at the patterns, stunned into silence. Someone finally asked, "Is this a message?" A radio engineer shook his head. "No, messages vary. This is signaling." Another asked, "Signaling what?" No one dared answer, but the timing was obvious. The black phase emission, the harmonic frequency, the broadcast. It was announcing the next phase, the strengthening, as some researchers quietly called it when no one else was listening. The energy readings spiked by 20%. Atmospheric modeling simulations updated automatically with the new numbers. Impact yield rose again, 27 million megatons. Dr. Cade stared at the model as the line thickened, as the probabilities solidified, as every alternate possibility vanished one by one, like falling dominoes. "Every time it changes color," she whispered, "it becomes stronger." She could feel the eyes of the room on her, waiting for the rest. And we have no idea how many phases are left. The shift cycles accelerated further. Every 4 hours, then every 3, then every 2. Each cycle brighter and more violent than the last, like the object was burning through layers of itself, shedding restraint. On November 18th, something new happened, something that erased the final doubts of the last skeptics. The object expanded, not physically, not in mass, in silhouette. A halo emerged around it, a glowing geometry that wasn't spherical or irregular as natural halos are, but symmetrical, hexagonal. 6 perfect sides forming a frame of shimmering light. No known natural process creates 6-sided photometric halos around interstellar bodies. Nothing in nature snaps into clean geometry in deep space. Something inside 3I-8LES was activating, or unfolding. One scientist vomited into a waste bin, another left the room crying, a third simply stared, jaw slack, whispering, "No, no, no." Dr. Cade forced herself to stay upright, gripping the side of her console until her nails bent backwards. "This isn't an object," she said. "It's a mechanism." She didn't mean it metaphorically, she meant every syllable. A mechanism with stages, a mechanism with phases, a mechanism approaching activation. But activation of what? No one dared to guess. On November 21st, the world almost found out. The 6-sided halo flickered once, twice, then flared to 10 times the previous brightness, illuminating a patch of space larger than the moon's apparent diameter, as if something inside was testing itself, thrust against an internal barrier, warming up. The signal burst returned, this time accompanied by a low-frequency oscillation that shook sensors across 3 continents.
The oscillation wasn't random. It matched the resonance frequency of the hexagonal halo. Something was strengthening the field. Something was preparing. Within hours, the color changed again, into a blinding aurora of shifting hues, each pulse sharper and more violent than the last, cutting across space like a heartbeat going into arrhythmia. The energy curve climbed so high, the upper range of the graphs had to be expanded, twice, then 3 times, and finally, there was a pause. The first pause in days. Every observer froze. Every scientist held their breath. 3I-8LAS went dim. Not dark, dim. Like a creature inhaling deeply before a final effort. A terrible electric calm swept through the monitoring rooms. Silence so thick it seemed to press on the eardrums. This was new, and new meant danger. At 11:02 p.m. UTC, the dimness shifted. A flare ignited from deep within the hexagon, a slow, expanding glow of white-gold light pushing toward the edges. When it reached the boundary, the geometry reacted, flexing, warping, tightening inward like something bracing for impact. The object was preparing, and the scientists watching it understood in that moment that whatever happened next would not be another color change. It would be the beginning of the final transformation, the one that would determine what hit Earth. If it hit as a rock,
The night the transformation began was the night the first secret evacuation orders were drafted. Not public ones, those would come much later, if they ever came at all. These were internal directives designed for heads of agencies, key scientific personnel, and people whose disappearance from their posts would trigger global panic if not handled with surgical precision. The world still slept beneath its ordinary sky. Lights flickered in kitchens, cars hummed along highways, couples fought, children dreamed, cities pulsed with their usual static noise. No one knew that miles above them an object from another star was stretching itself open like a machine unfolding its wings. But deep beneath the South American desert, the people who were watching the live telemetry understood something the rest of humanity could not. 3I-8LAS had not yet reached its final form. The hexagonal halo that had stunned the monitoring team was no longer a halo. It was no longer a boundary or a frame. It was rotating. Slowly at first, like the loosened lid of a jar turning under unseen hands, then faster. Frequency logs from observatories across Earth captured the acceleration curve, a steady, deliberate ramp-up. Not mechanical vibration, not cometary spin, something else, something controlled, something choosing to accelerate. As the hexagon turned, the shimmering lines sharpened. Pale filaments of light stretched between each vertex, forming a lattice of structured geometry that wrapped around the core like a cage made of energy. And inside that cage, the movement continued, a shifting of shapes that made no sense in natural physics. Curved arcs folding in on themselves, sharp edges emerging and dissolving, light refracting as if through surfaces that changed angles faster than the cameras could capture. Every few seconds, the geometry broke for a heartbeat, revealing a darkness beneath it. Not empty darkness, a dense, solid, void black that seemed to swallow the surrounding light. "There's something inside it," someone whispered. But no one responded because they all felt the same thing at the same moment. The shiver of realization that whatever was emerging was not meant to be seen by human eyes. The object pulsed again. A new color, one no one had seen before, one sensors had to invent a classification for because human language had no word for it. A color that felt like pressure on the skull. A color that tasted metallic on the tongue. A color that made a few people clutch their chests as if their hearts were trying to match its rhythm. One researcher collapsed. Another vomited blood. A third simply whispered, "It's communicating," before fainting. But even those who remained conscious didn't understand what the pulses meant. They only understood that the pulses were increasing in frequency and strength and reach. By dawn, satellites were picking up interference patterns similar to solar storms, but they weren't coming from the sun. They were coming from 3I Atlas. At 0922 UTC, the first global anomaly occurred. Power fluctuations, not catastrophic, not destructive, but synchronized. Lights flickered across entire continents at the exact same second. In Tokyo, in Buenos Aires, in Berlin, in Nairobi, in Toronto. A global blink. The kind of event no natural cosmic body should ever cause. But that wasn't the frightening part. The frightening part came when analysis revealed that the interference wave was perfectly timed with a specific rotation angle of the hexagon, a deliberate orientation, like an antenna aligning itself. The committee reconvened within minutes. This time there were no arguments, no disagreements, no academic pride. They all understood what the data meant. "It's preparing to activate something," Dr. Cade said. Her voice was hoarse from fatigue, but steady. "And it's using the Earth as, what? A target? A receiver? A trigger?" No one answered. For the first time since the discovery of the object, silence felt like surrender. And then one of the analysts, a man known for his skepticism and refusal to entertain anything beyond Newtonian mechanics, spoke with a quiet certainty that chilled the entire room. "It's not going to hit us as a solid body," he said. "Whatever it impacts Earth will be whatever it becomes." He didn't say the next part, but everyone thought it, and we have no idea what that is. Government representatives demanded new impact simulations, hoping desperately for a scenario where the transformation would reduce mass, where the object would fragment, where atmospheric entry would tear it apart. But the new models were worse. The mass wasn't decreasing during transformation, it was increasing. Not through accumulation, through compaction, like metal being forged and hammered into denser form. Atmospheric impact yield projections climbed again. 30 million megatons, then 32. Within an hour, revised calculations placed the potential global extinction threshold at 98%. "We can't survive this," someone whispered. No one contradicted him. And yet the world outside continued unabated. People scrolled on their phones, laughed in street cafes, took flights, bought groceries, posted selfies, completely unaware that a weapon-sized object, whether natural or not, was angling toward their planet and strengthening itself with every color cycle. The next transformation happened at 1403 UTC. This one was different. Violent. The hexagon collapsed inward for a split second, like a metal jaw slamming shut. The internal structure convulsed. A ring of white-hot plasma erupted from the core and expanded outward before vanishing instantaneously. Cameras glitched, sensors overloaded. One telescope lost its main mirror due to thermal stress from the sudden radiation spike. For 6 long seconds, no one saw anything. When the image feed returned, 3I Atlas was gone, or seemed gone. The coordinates showed nothing, no glow, no halo, no shape, just a faint scatterlight of background stars. Panic swept the observatory. Instruments were recalibrated, fields rescanned, frequencies swept. Nothing. 3I Atlas had disappeared. Absurd, impossible, terrifying. But then someone noticed a distortion in the corner of the frame. Barely visible, a warping of starlight like heat haze on asphalt. "There," Dr. Cade shouted. "Enhance it." The AI did, and in the distortion a new shape emerged. Smooth, angular, compact, smaller than before, denser, faster. Something like a blade of light wrapped around a shadow, and it was accelerating. Real-time velocity measurements spiked so sharply that the graph shot off the chart. "It finished transforming," Dr. Cade whispered. "This is its true form."
The new form was sleeker, sharper, aerodynamic in a way nothing drifting through the void needed to be, unless it was meant to enter an atmosphere. Its trajectory updated automatically, the new model rendered on the screen. Impact probability, 99.7%. Impact speed, higher than any natural object ever recorded. Impact sight, updating, updating, updating. A red circle appeared over the Atlantic Ocean, then grew, then shrank, then stabilized. Eastern seaboard, millions of people, hours from major population centers. Governments were notified immediately. Public statements were drafted but held in standby behind classified walls. The world continued its ordinary dance while the object aimed with surgical precision. Then came the final color change of that day. Not a pulse, not a flare, not a glitch. A shift so deep and so total that it extinguished every sensor trying to measure it. A pure, absolute, devouring darkness swallowed the object's form. Not black like space, a black that looked alive. A black that radiated pressure, not light. Scientists stared at it as if looking into the mouth of something ancient and hungry. A machine, a creature, a weapon, or something stranger than all three. The darkness pulsed once, and every magnetic field monitor on Earth spiked. The pulse matched Earth's magnetic resonance frequency. The object had synchronized with the planet. And that is when Dr. Cade said the sentence that would later be quoted in every classified memo for the rest of humanity's short future. It's not preparing to hit the Earth. It's preparing to use the Earth. No one breathed. No one blinked. No one asked the question that trembled in the back of every mind. Because they already knew. Whatever 3i Atlas was becoming, Earth wasn't just its destination. Earth was part of its design.
From the moment Dr. Cade said those words, the meaning of the mission changed. Until then, the committee had been trying to prevent an impact, searching for a trajectory they could shift, a mass they could fragment, a future they could still rewrite with enough courage and equations. But when the object synchronized with Earth's magnetic field, when it pulsed in resonance with the planet like a tuning fork finding its counterpart, something ancient inside the human mind stirred. The fear that the Earth itself was being claimed. A natural object does not bind itself to a planet's magnetic signature. A rock does not listen. A comet does not harmonize. Only something that needs the planet for its final stage would do that. The first models trying to interpret the resonance signal were useless. The second ones were worse, filled with contradictions and feedback loops that made no physical sense. Only the third model, the one constructed reluctantly by a team that didn't believe in its own equations, made any sense. And that sense terrified them. The resonance pattern was not just synchronizing with Earth, it was scanning it. Not visually, not with radar, magnetically, like it was feeling the contours of the planet's protective shield, mapping its weaknesses, its nodes, its symmetry, testing the cage before entering it. Governments argued again behind locked doors, but the arguments were no longer about telling the public or not. They were about what humanity was supposed to do when facing an object whose behavior resembled that of a predator testing its prey. Militaries proposed weapons. Someone suggested detonating nuclear warheads in space, not to destroy the object, but to alter its magnetic signature, to confuse it, to blind its sensing. But analysts shut the idea down within minutes. It doesn't navigate by light, they said. It navigates by fields. Nukes won't blind it, they'll feed it. And they had evidence, because after every color cycle, after every phase shift, the object's internal field strengthened. It was absorbing energy, stellar, ambient, electrical, in ways no one understood. The more the universe touched it, the stronger it became. The worst realization came next. Earth was full of energy. Magnetic lines, thermal gradients, atmospheric charge, a spinning metal core, a living dynamo. If the object needed a catalyst, if it needed a planetary-scale engine for whatever its final stage was, then Earth wasn't just the target. Earth was the fuel. At 0741 UTC the next morning, the object pulsed again. This time, the pulse wasn't directed outward, it was directed downward, toward Earth. A spear of invisible force shot through space at nearly the speed of light. It wasn't radiation, it wasn't particles, it was something deeper, a magnetic impact. The wave slammed into the planet's magnetosphere like a hammer. Satellites drifted off course by centimeters. The ISS rotated 3 degrees off alignment before correcting. GPS clocks jittered by milliseconds. And all over Earth, animals bolted. Birds fled in swirling patterns of panic. Dogs barked at empty air. Whales changed course. Herds stampeded for no visible reason. The world felt something humans did not. In the astronomical bunker beneath Atacama, alarms erupted in red and orange waves across the screens. The magnetosphere had taken a hit, a direct one. Did it just attack Earth? Someone shouted. No, Dr. Cade said with a trembling voice. It's calibrating. She pointed at the displays, where a ghostly map of the planet's magnetic field now shimmered faintly. The wave had triggered detailed readings, like sonar bouncing off the hull of a submarine. It's mapping us, she whispered. It's preparing the planet for something. The next hours were a blur of frantic calculations. Interference levels rose by the minute. The hexagonal structure around the object tightened further, its edges glowing a deep, impossible purple that cameras struggled to capture. Each rotation produced microbursts of magnetically charged particles, the equivalent of deep space sparks, leaving streaks of light that twisted behind it like the traces of some celestial engine warming up. And all the while its trajectory held firm, aimed at Earth, stable, precise. Then, at 11:56 UTC, it initiated the next phase, not through color this time, through gravity. It generated a localized gravitational anomaly, not large enough to affect Earth, not noticeable to the public, but strong enough to distort the orbits of micrometeoroids within a 100-kilometer radius around it. They shifted, they spiraled, they fell toward it like iron filings toward a magnet, and then they disappeared. Vaporized? Absorbed? Converted? No one could be sure. Telemetry showed each rock fragment approaching, heating, then vanishing into the core like droplets of water falling into a furnace, and with each absorption, the object brightened. It's feeding, one astrophysicist whispered, horrified. It's fueling up. But fueling up for what? That question finally had a partial answer an hour later, when a new set of spectral lines appeared in the object's data. Lines corresponding to elements found not in stars, comets, or interstellar dust, but in planetary cores, heavy metals, iron, nickel, cobalt. As if the object was preparing itself for something that required planetary-grade materials, something that required density, heat resistance, structural integrity beyond anything a drifting visitor from deep space should need. By the afternoon, the transformation was nearly complete. The object's silhouette had sharpened into a long, blade-like form, shimmering with dark, metallic sheen, wrapped in an aura of electromagnetic charge so intense that even the vacuum around it glowed faintly. A tail formed,
Not a cometary tail, but a linear distortion of space-time, a narrow ripple of bent starlight stretching miles behind it, like a contrail of gravitational tension. That's when NASA, ESA, CNSA, JAXA, and Roscosmos all reached the same conclusion independently. I-3/Atlas was no longer an object. It was a vehicle. Not one designed for long travel, not one built for exploration, one designed for impact. The atmosphere models updated again. Impact velocity rose. Impact precision tightened. The red circle on the map became a pin-sized dot of perfect accuracy. There was no drift, no wobble, no uncertainty. It was correcting for Earth's rotation. It was timing itself with the planet's spin. It was choosing the moment. At 0722 UTC, the object emitted its brightest pulse yet. The world didn't see it. The sky looked unchanged, but the sensors on the ground detected something strange, a faint, low-frequency vibration traveling through the atmosphere. Not seismic, not sonic, atmospheric. A pressure wave felt only by sensitive instruments in certain living creatures. Insects froze. Birds dropped from the sky. In the bunker, the vibration made the lights flicker. For the first time, someone said what everyone had been afraid to say. This isn't just an interstellar object, it's a weapon aimed at Earth. But Dr. Cade shook her head, staring at the data with hollow eyes. Weapons kill, weapons destroy, but this isn't preparing to destroy Earth. It's preparing to use Earth. The room fell silent. She continued, "It's synchronized with our magnetic field. It's mapping the core. It's absorbing heavy elements. It's preparing for atmospheric entry with a form optimized for penetration. It's not trying to destroy Earth. It's trying to reach something inside it. The Earth's core, the very heart of the planet." "Why?" someone asked. Her answer chilled everyone who heard it. "Because whatever it becomes at the end of this transformation needs something only Earth can provide." Outside, the world continued its ordinary rhythm.
By the time the object entered its silver phase, the committees had stopped pretending they could change the outcome. They no longer talked about redirection strategies, nuclear detonations, or gravitational slingshots. All the simulations, all the models, all the equations pointed to the same bleak truth. Nothing humanity built in its brief flicker of existence could stop an interstellar object that strengthened itself by consuming energy, harmonizing with magnetic fields, feeding on celestial debris, and refining itself with every transformation. The question was no longer, how do we stop it? The new question, the one that felt like a knife pressing against the soul, was, what is it becoming? And why here? Why Earth? That final question gnawed at Dr. Cade as she monitored the latest readings. The silver light around 3I/Atlas was unlike anything she had measured before. It wasn't illumination. It wasn't reflection. It was activity. The object wasn't glowing. It was processing. Every flicker, every pulse, every rapid microflash in the silver spectrum resembled computational cycles, like the object was running through a sequence, a checklist, final steps. It wasn't a comet entering its last days. It was a machine booting up its final protocol. At 0312 UTC, the hexagonal shell rippled. Not in the soft, fluid way it had earlier, but in a violent, angular snap, as if the geometry was cracking open from internal force. Cameras zoomed in, filters adjusted, and the world inside the shell finally revealed itself. A core, metallic, glossy, blacker than black, with faint veins of molten silver running along its surface like lightning trapped beneath glass. It pulsed once, twice, then held steady in an unnatural stillness, like a heart preparing for the beat that would change everything. Dr. Cade felt sweat bead at the base of her spine. Her fingers hovered over the console. "How dense is that?" someone whispered. Readings updated. Numbers spiked. Silence spread. "Denser than osmium," a physicist muttered. "Denser than neutron-forged alloys. Denser than—" He stopped. Everyone already understood. They were staring at something engineered on a level far beyond anything human civilization could dream of. Something built for endurance, built for impact, built to survive the unimaginable. But the question echoed again. Survive impact. For what? At 0401 UTC, the core split. Not physically, magnetically. A seam of white fire tore across its surface. A crack that wasn't a crack, but a window into something beneath. Something moving. Something alive in a way that matter shouldn't be. It expanded outward, prying the core open like a blooming flower made of metal and starlight. 6 segments peeled back. A 7th unfolded from within. A structure formed. Circular, layered, fractal. Something that looked horrifyingly like an eye. And for the first time in human history, something from another star turned toward Earth. Intentionally. The eye locked on the planet. Cameras across Earth trembled with interference, as though the object were looking directly through them, directly through the atmosphere, directly into the magnetic heart of the world. "It's scanning again," someone choked out. "No," Dr. Cade whispered. "It's choosing." The core eye pulsed, and something invisible washed over Earth. Not radiation, not heat, not gravity. A signal. A low-frequency sweep that traveled through the magnetosphere, down the poles, through the crust, deep into the mantle, all the way to the spinning core. Every magnetic sensor spiked. Compasses twitched. Birds screamed in mid-flight. The auroras brightened with unnatural sharpness, rippling in jagged, strobing patterns. The Earth shuddered, not physically, but magnetically, as if an external hand had grazed its deepest, oldest scar. In the bunker, people clung to desks as the air itself vibrated. The lights flickered, the screens glitched. A deafening metallic groan echoed through the underground halls, not from the speakers, but from the Earth itself. Then, shockingly, the signal stopped. The air stilled. Silence returned. But the silence was worse. Because everyone in that room, every scientist, every analyst, every engineer, knew exactly what the signal had been. The object wasn't mapping Earth anymore. It had found what it was looking for. And now it was aligning. "It's matching rotation speed," an orbital specialist breathed. The models updated. The object adjusted its tilt by 0.003 degrees, the exact offset needed to hit the planet's magnetic north at a descending entry angle. "It's matching position," another tilt correction. "It's matching timing," a velocity microcorrection. "It's locking on to the core." The words were spoken barely above a whisper, but the room heard them like a death sentence. At 0918 UTC, the object pulsed again, the largest pulse yet. The silver light erupted like a supernova trapped inside a metal seed. The hexagon spun faster, the tail expanded, the blade-like body tightened into an aerodynamic spear. And then, a shockwave blasted outward. Not physical, not harmful, a pure electromagnetic burst that swept across space, slamming into every satellite, sensor, and monitoring station in its path. Screens went white, data streams collapsed, instruments fried. For a terrifying 3 seconds, the world went blind. When the feeds returned, everyone gasped. Because 3I/Atlas was gone. Not disappeared, just moved. Closer. Significantly closer. The object had accelerated itself with a maneuver no comet, meteor, or natural force could replicate. It had jumped forward, sacrificing its position to tighten its alignment with Earth's magnetic axis. Now it was only days away. Its velocity surpassed entry thresholds. The atmospheric modeling system projected a never-before-seen pattern of entry. The object wasn't going to burn. It wasn't going to shatter. It was going to pierce the atmosphere like a needle passing through silk. At 11:03 UTC, Dr. Cade and the team monitored the internal readings of the object's core. Something was happening inside it. The metal-like petals surrounding the eye folded back inward. The core compressed, solidifying into a spherical shape so dense that gravitational sensors briefly registered fluctuations as if space itself tightened around it. That's when they realized what the object was doing. "It's preparing for descent," Dr. Cade whispered. "The next phase will be atmospheric entry." The words hit the room like stones. A mathematician shook his head in disbelief. "But why transform so close to impact?" he asked. "Why wait until the final days?" Dr. Cade swallowed. Her voice was trembling. "Because it wanted Earth to be ready." That was the moment the new simulations began rendering themselves in real time. Something strange appeared, something impossible. The magnetic field of Earth, the one that usually forms a familiar dipole shape, had begun shifting, subtle but measurable. The poles drifted faster than they ever had before. Lines of force twisted, pulled, bent, aligning themselves not with the sun, not with the solar wind, but with the incoming object. The Earth was responding to it, not consciously, not biologically, but magnetically, mechanically, reacting like a tuning fork resonating with a stronger one. The object wasn't just using Earth. It was controlling it, steering the magnetic field like reins, guiding the planet into its own final configuration. The horror.
63 hours before impact, the planet still looked peaceful. Clouds drifted across blue skies. Children walked to school. People ordered coffee, checked their notifications, kissed their loved ones goodbye before work. They had no idea that deep underground, far beneath the Atacama Desert, a room full of people were watching the slow execution of a planet. No alarms, no warnings, no announcements, just the quiet ticking of a countdown clock the rest of humanity would never see. As 3I/Atlas closed the distance, new anomalies erupted across Earth. Auroras appeared in places that had never seen them before, over the Caribbean, over Egypt, over Australia. Not the soft, ribbon-like waves of polar lights, but jagged, electric lines, flickering like the heartbeat of something enormous, awakening beneath the crust.
Compasses spun. Birds lost their migration routes. The Schumann resonance, Earth's natural electromagnetic hum, doubled, then tripled, then began to oscillate in a pattern that perfectly matched the pulses coming from the incoming object. The Earth was no longer defending itself. It was participating. The realization tore through the bunker like a cold wind. If Earth was aligning with the object, then whatever was about to happen would not be resisted by the planet's own magnetic field. It would welcome it. "It's not an attack," Dr. Cade whispered, staring at the live magnetic grid. "It's a merger." Her voice trembled. "Something is coming to activate the core." Hours blurred into each other. The object's descent path sharpened with every update. Its velocity climbed. Its silhouette grew brighter, not with reflected sunlight, but with internal power, a silver furnace cutting through the void. And all the while, the Earth hummed louder. Cities began experiencing strange electrical disturbances. Lights dimmed and brightened in slow, rhythmic waves. Elevators stalled between floors. Digital clocks drifted seconds out of sync and then snapped back violently, as if whipped by an unseen hand. People felt it. They didn't understand it, but they felt it. A pressure behind the eyes, a ringing in the ears, a nausea that came and went in pulses. Headlines blamed solar storms. Scientists who knew better stayed silent. With 40 hours left, the object entered what analysts called the impact corridor. It could no longer miss. It no longer attempted to. It rode Earth's magnetic field like a railgun slug, accelerating with terrifying precision. And then came the second-to-last transformation. The object's silver glow collapsed inward, folding into a compact shape so dense the sensors overloaded again. When the cameras recovered, the form was different. No longer a blade, no longer a spear. Now it resembled a cylinder wrapped in rotating rings of magnetic metal, each ring spinning in a direction opposite the one below it, generating unimaginable torque. Lightning-like arcs flickered between the rings, white, purple, black. Space around the object warped visibly. "It's building something," someone said shakily. "A shield?" another guessed. "A reactor?" Dr. Cade shook her head. "A drill," she whispered. "It's preparing to pierce the crust." It wasn't the shape of a warhead. It was the shape of an insertion device designed to survive the penetration of rock, ocean, mantle, all the way to the molten core. At T-minus 26 hours, the skies around the world darkened, not from clouds, but from magnetic interference that bent sunlight like heat above a flame. The upper atmosphere shimmered in translucent sheets of violet and black, a global aurora no one could explain. Social media lit up with videos of the impossible skies. People stared upward in awe, not knowing that the beautiful patterns above them were the contours of Earth's magnetic field being reshaped from the outside. And then came the earthquakes. Soft at first, tremors too gentle to break glass, but strong enough to rattle nerves. They came not from tectonic plates, but from the shifting magnetic field that tugged at the iron-rich layers of the mantle. Animals fled inland from coasts. Fish swam in frantic spirals. Flowers closed in the middle of the day. Everything alive sensed the approaching convergence, except us. With 12 hours left, the world finally saw 3I Atlas with the naked eye. It appeared as a silver star with a halo of rotating black rings, brighter than Venus, brighter than any meteor. News outlets scrambled to announce it as an unexpected near-Earth object. Governments prepared emergency broadcasts, but it was too late. The object was already inside the moon's orbit, moving faster than any spacecraft ever built. And then the final pulse. T-minus 6 hours. The silver object erupted with a flash so intense that half the telescopes pointed at it shut down automatically to protect their sensors. The rings accelerated to a blur. Space around the object rippled as though reality itself were tightening. A beam of pure magnetic force shot downward, touching Earth's magnetosphere. The planet responded instantly. The magnetic pole shifted by nearly a full degree.
The auroras exploded into blinding light. The Earth's core, the great spinning heart of molten iron, changed rotation speed by a fraction, so small only NASA's deepest sensors could detect it. But even that fraction was enough to confirm what everyone in the bunker feared. Earth was synchronizing itself with the incoming object, like two gears clicking into alignment. "What happens when they match perfectly?" a young engineer asked. No one answered. They didn't need to. With 3 hours left, the object entered the upper trajectory window. Its rings retracted, its body elongated again into a spear-like form, but this time with a sharpened, rotating tip, a magnetic spike that glowed hotter than any plasma humans had ever seen. The drill, the insertion point, the instrument for whatever was hidden inside the core of this machine from another star. T-1 hour. Cities fell silent as power grids flickered uncontrollably. Not from outage, from overload. Earth's magnetic field convulsed. The sky turned white over the Atlantic as auroras flared brighter than lightning. Birds dropped from the sky mid-flight. Satellites tumbled out of orbit. And in the secure bunker, Dr. Cade stared at the final data stream. Tears slid down her face. Not from fear, but from the overwhelming, devastating clarity of understanding what was about to happen. "It's not destroying the Earth," she whispered. "It's upgrading it." At T-5 minutes, 3I Atlas became brighter than the sun. At T-1 minute, the magnetic spike extended to full length, wrapped in a vortex of spinning black rings. At T-10 seconds, the object aligned perfectly with Earth's core, the magnetic fields locking into place like the teeth of a mechanical jaw. In the final second before impact, Dr. Cade spoke the last words ever recorded in her log. Earth was never alone, and we were never in control. The object struck. No explosion, no fireball, no apocalypse. Instead, a sound. A deep, roaring, planetary groan as the object pierced the crust, drilled through the mantle, and vanished into the spinning core. The Earth shuddered. The sky rippled like water. Every compass spun at once. Every bird screamed. Every city flickered. Then silence. A silence so vast and complete it felt like the world was holding its breath. 14 seconds later, the Earth's magnetic field erupted. A shockwave of blinding white light burst from the poles, racing around the planet in a perfect ring. The core pulsed, once, twice, then began to spin faster, much faster, too fast. And humanity understood, too late, what had truly happened. Earth had become part of the machine.